All right, well, welcome. My name is Sarah Pearson. I am with the Boca Chamber, and I am very excited to be here today. Every year we have this unbelievable speaker where we can actually take this program and keep it going for another 4 hours usually with Dr. Watson when it comes to our elections and what he foresees happening and giving us some great facts. So the program is unbelievable. Couldn't be more appropriate right now when the timing. But you are at our IBA program, which is a roundtable program. So first, let's have Barbara Cambia with Lynn University give us a proper welcome. If we were doing this in person, we would be on campus.
Yes, and we would
have the opportunity. So Barbara.
So hi, everybody. Welcome. Hi, Marisol. So like Sarah said, Marisol is the one who really initiated this whole program. And so we are very honored and privileged to be a part of it. And I'm so excited for you all to hear our famous Dr. Watson, who is amazing. And I know we have a number of alumni on the call today. I think Kristen Migliano is on the call, one of our faculty member and a Lynn alum. So just enjoy today and take your notes because you're going to hear a lot of really helpful information. Thank you.
Thank you, Barbara. All right. So now it's time for me to introduce our speaker, which of course we all know we've got the whole fan club here and a lot of us have followed him through many elections. And again, it's been a pleasure to have him each year, especially during the presidential elections, to kind of get the history and just, facts and great information about what's happened in the past and what it could mean for the future. So Dr. Robert Watson is a professor, author, historian, media commentator, and community activist. He joined the faculty of Lynn in 2007 after spending 15 years teaching at universities around the country. He's published over 40 books and approximately 200 scholarly articles, essays, and chapters on topics in history and politics. His recent books, America's First Crisis, The Nazi Titanic, The Ghost Ship of Brooklyn, and George Washington's Final Battle, have received critical acclaim. A frequent media commentator, he has been interviewed by local, national, and international radio, print, and online and television outlets, including CNN, CNBC, Time, USA Today, The New York Times, BBC, and more. He served for many years as the political analyst for WPTV, a Sunday columnist for the Sun Sentinel newspaper, and a regular guest on television shows To the Point, which is WPTV, and Issues, which is WPBT, which was PBS. And he spoke on radio programs on RTE1 Ireland, the Australian Broadcast Corporation, WIOD 610 AM, and WFTL 850 AM. Professionally, he co-convened a half dozen national conferences on the American presidency and regularly lectures at universities, museums, and historic sites around the country. And just how lucky we are that he lives in our city. He served as the editor for numerous projects, including SUNY Press book series on the American presidents, the multi-volume, multi-edition encyclopedia sets, American Presidents, and American First Ladies, the scholarly journals White House Studies and the Social Science Journal, and the quadrennial report to the First Lady, which was presented to the White House every 4 years after elections. He also served on boards for many scholarly journals, academic associations, and community foundations, as well as with the Harry Truman Foundation, Calvin Coolidge Foundation, and George McGovern Library and Center for Public Service. An active volunteer in our community, he has conveyed many public town hall events on current issues and historical topics. He served as a judge for National History Day contests and children's spelling bees. He's hosted civic education and history workshops for teachers. He's moderated political debates. He's co-founded 3 nonprofit think tanks dedicated to civic education, political reform, and fact-checking campaign lies. We had a little conversation about that earlier, so hopefully he'll give us some fun insight on that.
Busy.
Yeah. And in his free time, which I can't imagine he has any free time, he is a popular lecturer aboard luxury cruise lines, which is awesome, for the prestigious one-day university programs around the country and on history tours both in the U.S. and internationally. And when we're really lucky, he gets to speak at the International Business Alliance. So without further ado, Dr. Watson, thank you.
Oh boy, wow. So thank you, Sarah. I appreciate it. And Chastity, thank you for organizing this. Barbara, thank you for the invitation. Yeah, I wish we were in person. I enjoyed when you all would come out to Lynn and we could sit and chat and interact. I look forward to getting back to those days. Just a quick hello. I'm sure I didn't get everybody, but I saw so many friendly and familiar faces. Karen and Jan, Peggy, Ken, Zachary, Laura, Jennifer, Susan, Kristen, Valentina, Dylan, and then I stopped writing. So good to see everybody. So I wish my topic was a little more pleasant. This is an interesting and bizarre election. I think it will end up being one for the history books, everybody. I also think that on election night, we're not going to go to bed and know who the president is going to be. I think this is, it's going to be an election month. I think there could be civil unrest on both sides of the aisle throughout the country. I suspect there will be multiple lawsuits filed. The Republican Party has already set aside teams of attorneys and a multi-million-dollar fund to bring lawsuits. So, and there's a lot of misinformation out there on the airwaves and coming out of political campaigns and various alleged news shows. So I thought I'd run through a little bit of what's happening right now, from the Supreme Court nomination to what will probably happen on election night, to what the law and the Constitution actually say will happen, should happen, is supposed to happen regarding the count, and simple things like the presidential line of secession, since the president contracted the virus. I'm going to share screen and do something I usually don't do, and that is I put a PowerPoint together just to maybe help everybody follow the points. So with that said, again, I'm delighted to be here. Thanks for all the, boy, you guys are going to be disappointed. I should have prepared some comments. But my favorite part of these is always the Q&A. And we've had so many good and vigorous question and answer sessions. So have at me afterward, okay, everybody? So here we go. Let's jump right into it. So there's a Supreme Court nomination, everyone. And this is interesting, a quick background and fact check. Of course, Barack Obama had nominated Merrick Garland to the Supreme Court, which would have been his third Supreme Court appointment. That's pretty impressive. Most presidents get 0, 1, or 2. It would have been his third. However, Mitch McConnell and the Republican Party did not move forward on the hearing, as you all remember. And you cannot get appointed to the Supreme Court if you don't have a hearing and an up and down vote. The argument back in Obama's last year as president by McConnell and virtually every Republican in Congress, Marco Rubio, our own senator from Florida, was very vocal, saying it just simply, presidents do not get an appointment to the bench in their last year. It is a guaranteed thing. That's 180 degrees wrong. There have been about 30 presidential appointments to the high court in the last year. So it was within Obama's right. It was within precedent for Merrick Garland to have the appointment. You heard Donald Trump during the debate. And by the way, I have to say, Lynn, of course, hosted the last presidential debate of 2012 between Obama and Romney. And that still, in my opinion, is the last real presidential debate we've had. At any rate, you heard President Trump say that Barack Obama was a bad president because he left office with dozens and dozens of appointments unfilled. That's half true. Obama did leave office with dozens and dozens of appointments unfilled at the district court, appellate court, and one at the Supreme Court level. It had nothing to do with him being a good or bad president. Mitch McConnell also refused to allow Obama to have several dozen district and appellate court appointments. Trump claimed he's made 200 appointments. He's made about 120. Still, that is a remarkable number. So McConnell, what he did was remarkably unethical, I believe unconstitutional. The Constitution in both Article 1, which is about the Congress, and Article 2, which is about the President, says that there is an advise and consent, that's the wording, mandate for the Senate. That is, when a president nominates someone, the Senate must, in a timely manner, give them a hearing and advise. Either they confirm them or they reject them. So that's a violation of the Constitution. The Democrats were so pathetically weak and unorganized that they didn't really come out and make that constitutional argument, which I'm still shocked about. Yeah, Trump has gotten a record number of appointments. So with the case of Merrick Garland, we had over 8 months before the election. So now the Republicans are saying it is okay to make an appointment in the last year, and it is. Now, the question is it okay to make an appointment this late in the game, October, with people already voting? You know, early voting starts in days in many states, and vote by mail has already started around the country. So the answer is this is unprecedented. Presidents that have had a chance to make an appointment to the courts just right before the election did not do so. Here's your precedent. Abraham Lincoln, 1864. Lincoln had an appointment open up in October, like we are now, for the High Court. Lincoln said he believed that the faith of the framers and the interpretation of it was such that he should not make an appointment. Let the people weigh in. We'll wait until after the election. So Lincoln waited until after the election. But we move ahead. So here's what the reason why I did that backstory. We're in a really interesting scenario now. So it's a 2-step process to appoint a justice to the Supreme Court. Step 1, they go before the Senate Judiciary Committee. If the Judiciary Committee gives a thumbs up, then they go before the full Senate and there's a vote there. So step number 1, Senate Judiciary Committee. The chair of the Judiciary Committee is Lindsey Graham from South Carolina. There are 22 members of the Judiciary Committee, and I put it here on the screen for you. 12 Republicans, 10 Democrats. Everyone expects that this vote will come down on strict party lines. So Judge Barrett would get approved by the Senate Judiciary Committee, 12-10. Then it would go to the full Senate. The full Senate is 53-47 with a Republican advantage, and that'll probably be the vote. But here's your monkey wrench. You ready for this? 2 Republican senators on the Judiciary Committee, Lee from Utah and Tillis from North Carolina, have COVID. So they have to quarantine. Now in the House, you can vote by proxy. The Senate rules are clear that you must be there in person. So they can't be there in person. That means the Judiciary Committee is now 10-10. Unless if they wait a couple of days, weeks until Lee and Tillis finish the quarantine, and if they have a speedy and full recovery. And of course, everybody wishes everybody a recovery for this. But so now it's 10-10, which means Lindsey Graham doesn't have the votes. Here's the other kicker. You need a quorum. For the Judiciary Committee, for committees in the Senate, a quorum is a simple majority. So if the 10 Democrats decide to boycott this and not show up, and both Democrats and Republicans in history have done that. I think it's unethical. I think it's not appropriate, but it's not illegal, and both parties have done it. So if the 10 Democrats boycott this, Graham only has 10 people, which is not enough for a quorum. If you don't have a quorum, you cannot have a hearing, you cannot have a vote. So Graham is now in a pickle, and this whole Barrett appointment, which was seen as a slam dunk, is now in question. What Graham is saying now, despite Senate rules being clear that you have to be there in person, Graham is talking about letting Lee and Tillis vote on Zoom. So he has a quorum. So Zoom in the Senate, Zoom in the Supreme Court, of course, everything comes down to Zoom. So we'll have to wait and see where that goes. Now, Mitch McConnell has also said that if the Zoom isn't cleared and if those 2 senators, Lee and Tillis, aren't recovered, he would then change Senate rules and bypass over 2 centuries of custom. By what McConnell said he'll do is he'll just bring Barrett's appointment directly to the full Senate and skip that first step. Is this illegal? No. Is it highly unethical and highly unusual? Yeah. Has McConnell done these kind of end arounds in the past? All the time. So if McConnell goes to the full Senate, he has a 53-47. But here's the kicker. 2 of those senators, as I just said, have COVID. So now he's down to 51-47. Another senator, Johnson from Wisconsin, just contracted COVID. So now he's down to 50. Now, two Republican senators, Collins from Maine and Murkowski from Alaska, said they would not vote on Barrett or any Supreme Court appointment until after the election. So right now, McConnell doesn't have the votes. Right now, Lindsey Graham and the Judiciary Committee doesn't have the votes. So we're going to have to wait and see how this thing plays out. And I suspect both sides are going to act inappropriately and violate custom, protocol, and Senate rules. Don't be surprised if McConnell looks at a very, very loose interpretation of Senate rules, or just has the Senate pass a new rule. So they don't have the votes. And so it looked like a slam dunk. Who the heck knows now? Next, everybody's contracting COVID. The president has it. The first lady has it. The press secretary, the spokesperson has it. The chair of the Republican National Committee has it. Former Governor Christie has it. Now, a couple of staffers, not political appointees, full-time, nonpartisan White House workers have it. So I think we need to talk about the line of secession. Remember, 4 presidents historically have died in office of natural causes. 4 have been assassinated, and 1 has resigned, Nixon. That's 9 presidents who didn't finish their term, and we had a line of secession, meaning the vice president became president. We've had 3 presidents impeached, Andrew Johnson in 1868, then Bill Clinton and Trump, but they were impeached but not removed from office. So impeachment's a 2-step process, as you probably remember. The House impeaches, the Senate removes. So all 3 were impeached. Andrew Johnson avoided removal by 1 single vote in the Senate. And here's the kicker. Andrew Johnson became president in 1865 when Lincoln was assassinated. And by the way, he was the brand new VP. He never appointed a vice president. So if Johnson had been removed by that 1 vote, this would have gone to Congress in terms of the line of secession, because there wasn't a vice president. Bill Clinton escaped removal by just 4 votes in the Senate, and Trump by the skin of his teeth as well. So that's a lot of times in history the president almost didn't finish their term. We've had many cases where the president almost died in office. Andrew Jackson escaped an assassination attempt with a pistol at point-blank range. Gerald Ford twice escaped assassination attempts. Ronald Reagan was hit and almost died in an assassination attempt. Grover Cleveland had his entire jaw removed in the late 1800s, everybody, and a prosthetic put in. This surgery could have killed him. So there were multiple cases. James K. Polk died just 3 months after leaving office. So it's worth talking about presidential secession. So a couple of quick things about it. First, President Trump alluded to this in the past, and Jared Kushner talked about it. Would there be a compelling reason to postpone the election? Here's the fact. The president cannot postpone the election. Congress can, not the president. So he can't do that. The line of presidential secession goes as follows. It's discussed in the Constitution. I wrote it down here, Article 2. So Article 1 is about the Congress. Article 2 is about the president. 3 about the judiciary. Then 4 through 7 about how to change the Constitution and various things. So Article 2 says that if the president is somehow incapacitated, the vice president becomes president. So that much is clear. Now, there are 3 laws that clarified where we go beyond the vice president. In 1792, there was a Secession Act that says it goes president, vice president, then president pro tem of the Senate. That's the ranking member of the Senate. Then Speaker of the House, and then it goes to the cabinet. In 1886, it was changed. Grover Cleveland's vice president, a guy named Thomas Hendricks, he died in office, the vice president. So it would have skipped from Cleveland and gone to the president pro tem of the Senate. So what they did in 1886, they passed a law to change secession. It now goes president, vice president, skips the president pro tem and speaker, and goes directly to the cabinet. The most recent and important one was 1947, pushed by my hero, Harry Truman. His Secession Act changed it up. Now here's what we have. President, then vice president. Truman switched it to put Speaker of the House next. He wanted someone that was elected. The cabinet's not elected. Then President pro tem of the Senate. So there's your top four. I have pictures of them here. Trump, Pence, of course. Pelosi, of course, is the speaker. Chuck Grassley from, from Iowa, is the ranking member in the Senate. So he would be president pro tem. After those four, God forbid if something happened to those four, then it goes to the cabinet. And there are 15 cabinet departments, and it goes in order that the departments were created. So the first cabinet department was State, that would be Pompeo. Then after that, it goes to Treasury, which is Mnuchin. Then after that is Defense, which is Esper. And after that, Attorney General Barr. And then we go from there, all the way through to number 15, Security. So that's the presidential line of succession. You know, God forbid this COVID crisis claims a number of people. That poses a threat national security-wise. Our enemies would surely try to take advantage of such instability, but we do have that chain of secession. Now, there's something called the Continuity in Government Commission, and I put that on the screen for you. This was set up after 9/11. Think about it. You know, the Pentagon was hit, the World Trade Center was hit. There was that fourth plane, which was brought down by some heroic passengers in a field in Western Pennsylvania. What if that was headed to the White House or to the Capitol? Think about the potential of a mass event at a State of the Union address when both chambers of Congress are there and much of the government is there, the world's press corps, or at an inauguration when everyone's there. So there are a couple of mechanisms, I'll just talk about two, that are in place for continuity in government. One you all know, and that is one cabinet member is always in an undisclosed location. So you always have one cabinet member, and that person is not picked and announced until right when it's the State of the Union or a similar event is taking place. That way, God forbid, if something happens and the entire cabinet is removed, there's one cabinet member. Typically, one member of the Supreme Court is not there, if not more than one. So at least there's some continuity in terms of our judicial branch. Typically, one of the members of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, those are the head of each of the military branches, is not there. That way, there's some continuity. The second thing is with the continuity in government, and I don't know for sure, you know, this is a need to know. I guess if I told you, I'd have to kill you, right? Or they'd have to kill me. And if you read people online saying they know, they don't know. There was a secret commission put together after 9/11 that figured out how does government continue if all 15 cabinet members are killed, if there's electromagnetic charge, that some kind of electromagnetic pulse that eliminates communication, satellites are down, so forth and so on. And I've gone to a couple scholarly panels on this. Here's what everybody thinks. If something happens to all the governors, if something happens to all the cabinet, it then goes to the governors. So we have 50 governors, and it would be in order that the states came into the union. So we go through all 50 and end up with Hawaii. So that gives us some continuity in government. There's two other things that we need to consider with this. One is the 20th Amendment. The 20th Amendment, which was in the 1930s, states that if something happens, we know if something happens to the president, the vice president becomes president. And I just told you in the 1947 Act, we have a whole line of succession. If something happens to the president-elect, this is what the 20th is saying. If something happens to the president-elect, the vice president-elect becomes president-elect. Now, there's three different categories of someone running for president. If you're running for president, you're a candidate for president, like Cory Booker or somebody. If you win your party's nomination at the conventions in the late summer, you're now not a presidential candidate, you're the presidential nominee. If you win the election on the first Tuesday after the first Monday in November, this year, November 3rd, you're the president-elect. So the 20th Amendment makes it clear if, let's say, Trump would win or Biden would win, and if something were to happen to either of them, then the vice president-elect, Pence or Harris, would become president-elect. Now, if something were to happen to Biden or Trump now, they're not yet the president-elect, so the 20th Amendment is quiet. They're still a nominee. So both parties, Dems and Republicans, have rules on this. The RNC, Republican National Committee, the DNC, would meet with leaders in Congress and they would pick the president-elect and vice president-elect. it's hard to imagine the Democrats not then just automatically picking Harris, but it's not a given. It's hard to imagine the Republicans not picking Pence, but it's not a given. So there's some uncertainty. Then they would have to pick a new VP. The other thing the 20th Amendment did is it moved the inauguration up. The inauguration used to always be March 4th. And in the year 1937, for FDR's second inaugural, they moved it up to January 20th. The last point here, and then I'll get into some scenarios. The 25th Amendment, this is from 1967. 25th Amendment states that if there's a presidential disability or incapacitation, intellectually, psychologically, physically, there's a mechanism for removing the president if the president is deemed mentally unfit or physically unfit. Do you remember the movie Air Force One with Harrison Ford? Was it Glenn Close? I think was the vice president. Air Force One was captured, remember, and he was kidnapped, so he couldn't discharge his duties. So there was talk of the vice president invoking the 25th Amendment. We've seen this twice in modern times. Both Ronald Reagan and George W. Bush went under surgery, and they invoked the 25th, and immediately passed the presidential powers on to Bush 1 and Dick Cheney, respectively, but just for a few hours. So here's the way the 25th works. The vice president, Pence, would need a majority of the cabinet, so 8 out of 15, or the majority of Congress to certify that the president is mentally, psychologically, physically unfit and incapacitated. If that's the case, the Congress has a couple days and the president has a couple days to respond in writing. Then Congress has 21 days to vote. And if they vote that the president is incapacitated, the vice president becomes president. And then the president, if they vote that the president's not, the president's reinstated. If the VP then becomes president, they have to pick a new VP, and you need that to be voted in by Congress. So all kinds of scenarios. So here's some more likely issues. How does the Electoral College work, and how does it not work? So first off, ignore these popular polls. Ask Hillary Clinton how these polls of the country work. Biden is up anywhere from 8 to 14 points in these polls. It doesn't matter because we don't have a national election. We have 50 state by state by state elections, everybody, and then DC. So there's 51 mini elections. It's state by state by state. There are 6 times in our history where the Electoral College did not produce an obvious president. That is, like in 2016 and 2000, also happened in 1800, 1824, 1876, and 1888. The person with more votes lost the Electoral College. So it's a state-by-state system. I have always opposed the Electoral College my entire career. I think it's indefensible. It's convoluted. No one understands it. I also think it suppresses voting turnout. For example, let's take Wyoming. They only have 3 electoral votes. And they always vote Republican overwhelmingly. So if you're a Democrat, why even bother voting? If you're a Democratic candidate for president, why even go to Wyoming? You could go to Wyoming every day and you're still going to lose. So they don't even go. If you're a Republican, why go to Wyoming? Even if you don't go, you're going to win. Flip the script. Hawaii. Hawaii only has 4 votes and it always votes Democratic. So if you're a Republican in Hawaii, why vote? If you're a Republican, you don't even waste your time to go all the way to Hawaii. It's expensive and time consuming, and you're never going to win. And a Democrat doesn't even have to go because they're going to win automatically. Whereas if we had a popular vote, there would be an incentive, I think, for people to go. However, if I was alive in 1787 and I was sitting next to John Adams and Ben Franklin at the Constitutional Convention, first of all, that would have been a blast. Secondly, I would have voted for the Electoral College. Why? The framers didn't like the Electoral College. They thought it was the least horrendous option available to them. So think of it this way. Our democracy, what Lincoln would later call government of, by, for the people, this was a brand new form of government, never before seen on this earth. The framers were going far beyond the Roman Senate, far beyond the classical Greek philosophers, what they contemplated. So they weren't sure that voting would work. And as you all know, before you can run, you have to walk. So they wanted to inch ourselves into this election. Many people are illiterate in 1790, let's say 1792. We don't have mass circulating newspapers, very few bridges. How do you even print a ballot around the country? What do people do? Put an X next to their name, next to a name if they're illiterate? Do you put them in a stagecoach and Indians chase the stagecoach? Who counts the votes? How do you certify who wins with the primitive technology and limited communications of the late 1700s? So heck, Palm Beach County still can't produce a reasonable ballot. Am I right? So how could you do it back then? So what the framers said is we would let the people vote because we have to develop a civic ethic, a civil ethos where you get used to voting, but your vote won't count. Your vote will count for mayor, but not for president. So Election Day, which was created in 1845, becomes the first Tuesday after the first Monday in November. First Tuesday after the first Monday in November, November 3rd this year. Why did they pick that date? We don't know. They wanted it to be after the fall harvest because most people worked in agriculture, or I should say, to be more precise, most people owned farms and slaves worked in agriculture. So they wanted it to be after the fall harvest. But your vote doesn't technically count. And on election night, the election's not over. The electors, each state picks a slate of electors equal to the number of senators and representatives you have. So Florida has 2 senators and 27 reps. So we get 29 electoral votes. Wyoming has 3, 1 rep, 2 senators, they have 3. Hawaii, 2 and 2, they get 4. California has 50 some. So you get a slate of electors. The electors cast their vote, get this, on the first Monday after the second Wednesday in December. I mean, that sounds like they were high when they made this up, right? First Monday after second Wednesday in December. That's when the electors vote. This year, that means December 14th. So on election night, I think on election night, they're going to still be counting absentee and vote by mail ballots because we're going to have a record number that came in. Most states have a measure that requires that they cannot start counting the votes by mail early. They have to wait till election day. It takes longer to count a vote by mail than a vote in person because you have to match the signature. So if you vote by mail, everybody, make sure your signature is your signature. They match it to the one on file, okay? So with a record number of votes coming in, they're not going to have a result on election night. I think there could be civil unrest. I'm not being partisan and I'm not being mean. Even if you like Trump, I think you would admit Trump will get up on election night and say, I won. He'll declare himself the winner. That's what he does. He will say it was a beautiful, amazing election, the biggest victory in history, and the voting is a fraud and a hoax. Why wouldn't he say that? He said it almost every day for the last couple of years. He said it when he was running in 2016. Now that's not true because we have until December 14th for the electors to cast their vote. Now, must the electors vote the way the people voted in the state during a popular vote? No. The electors were created to be, I use the term because I love sports, free agents. So electors can be free agents. Has this ever happened in history where electors voted the way the public didn't vote? The answer is yes. Let me give you some examples. With my hero, Harry Truman, in 1948, a Southern elector was angry at Truman because he was pushing civil rights, statehood for Israel, refugees from the Holocaust. So Truman was very unpopular in the South. So one of the electors, even though their state voted for Truman, they wrote in Strom Thurmond, the racist former governor and senator from South Carolina. Were they allowed to do that? Yeah. In 1976, a Republican elector did not like Jerry Ford, the Republican nominee, so he wrote in Reagan. Was he allowed to do that? Yeah. In 1988, a Democratic elector did not like Mike Dukakis. Do you remember the ticket was Dukakis and Benston? So the Democratic elector flipped the ticket, making it Benston Dukakis. Was he allowed to do that? Yeah. In the year 2000, an elector from DC refused to cast a vote. Why? They were protesting the Supreme Court's decision in Bush versus Gore. So they didn't vote. Were they allowed to? Sure. Here's the one that I like the most. In 2004, a Democratic elector, the ticket was John Kerry, John Edwards. They made a mistake and in hand wrote in Edwards. Must have been that expensive haircut. So Edwards technically had one more vote than John Kerry. Now, John Kerry lost to George W. Bush in a nail biter in 2004. Had a state flipped If John Kerry was the president, this would have had to go to the Supreme Court because technically his vice president Edwards would have one more vote than Kerry. So the electors are free agents. They can vote the way they want. Here's the other pickle. The Supreme Court decision in 2000 over Palm Beach County, Florida, allowed the states to certify the electors. So the state legislature has the authority to certify electors. The Constitution states that the state legislatures, by any means they feel appropriate, can certify electors. So if this election drags out into late November and December, Trump could theoretically lean on Republican governors and legislatures saying, irrespective of the electoral votes, certify the Republicans to vote for me. Is that highly inappropriate? Of course. Is it illegal? Not really. Could the states do it? Sure. Now, there are 6 big swing states: Florida, Arizona, Pennsylvania, Wisconsin, Michigan. All 6 swing states have Republican legislatures. Advantage Republicans. If it goes to the Supreme Court, conservatives have the court. Advantage Republicans. The other kicker is that it's a winner-take-all system. So if you win Florida by 1 vote or 1 million votes, you get all 29 of our electoral votes. If you win Wyoming by 1 vote or 10,000 votes, you get all 3 of their electoral votes. So it's a winner-take-all system. To make it even more confusing, Maine and Nebraska do not have a winner-take-all system. They have what's called a district system. So real quickly, there's 2 districts in Maine, District 1, District 2. If Trump wins District 1, he gets that 1 district vote, like Congressman Deutsch's district here, or Congresswoman Frankel, or Congressman Hastings, that district. If Biden wins District 2, Biden gets that 1 vote. Then whomever wins statewide gets the 2 Senate votes. So it'd be 3 to 1. So that's the way that works. Moving forward. So it's not impossible to predict who's going to win the election. Here's what we know. 40 to 44 of the states vote the same way every 4 years. So if you go from the year 2000 until now, you see an almost uniform voting format. For example, how is the West or left coast going to vote? Hawaii, California, Oregon, Washington. They're going to vote Democratic. They always do. How's Alaska going to vote? Republican. They always do. What about the big sky country? Montana, North Dakota, South Dakota, Idaho, Wyoming, Utah. How are they going to vote? Republican. They always do. And you know what, everybody? It doesn't matter who's on the ticket. So those votes, we already know how they're going to do. How's the South going to vote? Texas, Louisiana, Alabama, Mississippi, Georgia, South Carolina, Arkansas, Tennessee, West Virginia, Kentucky. They're going to vote Republican. They always do. What about that, the breadbasket, Kansas, Nebraska, Oklahoma? They're going to vote Republican. They always do. What about the Northeast? Massachusetts, Maryland, Rhode Island, Connecticut, New York, New Jersey, Vermont. They're going to vote Democratic. They always do. DC, Democratic. What that means, everybody, you can look here, I put a chart together. There are so many reliable states for the Republican Party in the South, but there are no reliable states in the Northeast for them. It's the exact opposite script for the Democrats. They can rely on the Northeast, but not a single state in the South. So the election will come down to anywhere between 4 and about 7 states. More so, it'll come down to 2 districts in each of those half dozen states. So let me show you something here. The Electoral College is the same every 4 years. Look, they all look alike. Here's the Electoral College in 2000, which looks like 2004, which looks like 2008, which looks like 2012, which looks like 2016. So it's almost always the same, everybody. There are only a few states, as I said a moment ago. There's always the big 3. All analysts say the 3 most important states are always Florida, Pennsylvania, and Ohio. And those 3 states together have 70 electoral votes. Why are those the 3 most important states? Because those are the 3 biggest swing states. Other big states like California always vote Democratic. Texas always votes Republican. New York's a big state, but it always votes Democratic. So these are the 3 big states that we don't know how they're going to vote. Think of Florida, you know, in 2004, it narrowly voted Republican. In 08, narrowly voted Democratic. In 12, narrowly voted Democratic. In 16, narrowly voted Republican. And in 2000, we still don't know how the hell we voted. So 2020 will be a nail biter, flip of the coin as well. So if someone wins all three, this thing's over. So one thing I've said, this will be the first presidential election since 1988 I haven't covered for the media. One thing I said for all those years was keep an eye on the big three. If someone wins those, good night, everybody. And in 2008, the polls are open, everyone, from 7 a.m. to 7 p.m. So when the polls start closing, that's when the early results start to be released. And shortly after 7 p.m., when I was working for the media, I went on in 2008 and I said, look, I know it's early, but Obama's got this. He is so far ahead in Florida, Pennsylvania, and Ohio. There's just not enough states left. Trump could pick up, I don't know, New Hampshire. He could pick up Nevada, but you know, what's that? That's still less than 10 votes, right? So it's over. Same thing in 2016, after the polls closed, Trump was so far ahead in those three states that I said, Trump's got this in the bag. There's not enough states for Hillary to swing it. There used to be 3 swing states in the West, Colorado, New Mexico, and Nevada. Now together they only have 19 votes, but here's the thing. From 2000 through, every election has been decided by 1 or 2 percentage points. So we have gotten completely split in this country, a third Dem, third Republican, a third Independent. These things are nail biters. So 19 votes could flip it. Now, no one's looking at those 3 states this year because those 3 Western states, which used to be purple, have now become blue. They're Democratic. Here's the swings everybody's looking at for 2020. We're looking at Arizona, Florida, Michigan, North Carolina, Ohio, Pennsylvania, Virginia, and Wisconsin. These are the states everyone's looking at. Biden is trending ahead of Trump in most of them. Most of them have Republican legislatures. A few, like Arizona and Florida, have not just Republican, but extremely conservative Republican governors. So that could be an advantage if this thing goes to some nuclear scenario. I'm going to skip this for the sake of time. It's always, the most important state is always Florida. You know that because we're the biggest swing state. Get this, Florida has emerged as the national bellwether. One of the things I liked about working for media outlets here in Florida is I got calls from media outlets all over the country and campaigns like Romney's campaign. All over the country, people would call and say, what's happening in Florida? Because Florida is the national bellwether. Let me just give 2 quick examples. One, from 1960 until today, the person that has won Florida has gone on to be president every single time but once. For 100 years, the winner of Florida has gone on to be president every single time but twice. The last time a Republican won the presidency without taking Florida was Calvin Coolidge. So Florida has emerged as a bellwether. Let me give you a second example. What everybody looks at when trying to figure out how people are going to vote, they break down the vote by demographics. How's the Black community going to vote? How's the Latino community going to vote? The Cuban American community, the gay community, the Jewish community, the youth vote, etc. Here's the thing. Florida has every major demographic group in massive numbers. We have one of the nation's largest Black populations. We have one of the nation's largest Latino populations, including Puerto Ricans, Cubans, and many other folks, Venezuelans, Argentines, Chileans, Brazilians. We have one of the nation's largest Jewish communities. We have one of the largest gay communities. We have the single largest veterans community. We have one of the largest youthful communities. Florida is very transient, a lot of young people, a lot of big universities in Florida. I'm not sure, but I'm going to go out on a limb and predict we may have one of the largest senior citizen communities too. So for all those reasons, Florida is the bellwether. Now we have 67 counties in Florida. I filled them in here for you. You can see that we're overwhelmingly red Republican. Republicans will win most of the counties, but Republicans win the counties where there's not many people. Democrats win the counties where there's a lot of people, like down here, Palm Beach, Broward, Miami-Dade. I'm going to skip that for the sake of time. So here's your scenarios on election night. We go to bed. We're not going to know who the winner is. Trump will declare himself the winner in the most beautiful, great election in history. It was a hoax. It was a fraud. I'm not being mean. That's what he always says. The answer is no. There will be lawsuits filed. Yes. There will be civil unrest. Yes. We have to consider the early voting, the vote the day of the election, and the vote by mail. Trump will likely win the vote the day of the election because Republicans are more likely to say they're going to go out that day. So if he counts that vote, early voting could go Democratic. Here you go. 4/5 of the states have early voting, including Florida. All states have early voting. 2/3 of them have no fault early voting. We now have no fault. You used to need a reason to vote early. Now you can just send me a ballot and you get to vote early. So all states have early voting in some capacity or another. All the states have vote by mail in some capacity or another. 5 states have vote by mail that's automatic. I made a list there: Colorado, Hawaii, Oregon, Utah, Washington. They automatically mail you a ballot. Now, here's the 2 dates for all of you to remember. By law, you have 35 days to count the vote. So no matter what Trump or the lawyers or whatever, the media, Fox, MSNBC, no matter what they say, we have till December 7th by law to count the vote. On December 14th, that's the first Monday after the second Wednesday in December, that's when the electors must be certified. So those are the 2 dates to remember, everybody, by law, by Constitution. So state by state certification, what we learned in 2000, Bush versus Gore allows the state to make the call. You could have Republican legislatures saying we're going to flip the vote and call it for Trump. They're allowed to do that. Article 2 of the Constitution says the legislatures can do it. The Republicans have the advantage. 28 of the states have a Republican legislature. So they have the advantage numerically over the Democrats. Democrats only have 22. There's an electoral college tiebreaker. Here's the way that works. If no one gets a majority, there's 538 electors. That's 435 House members, plus 100 senators equals 535, plus 3 for DC equals 538. The Constitution in Article 2 says you need a majority. That's 270. The magic number is 270. First person to 270, it's over. Now, if no one gets to 270, here's the constitutional tiebreaker, and this has happened throughout history. Each state gets 1 vote. The House calls it. Now, right now, the House is in Democratic hands. The Republicans have the Senate by 53, 47. The Democrats have the House by huge numbers. Therefore, Democrats would say, hey, if the House has the tiebreaker, Biden will win in a walk. No, because here's the way the tiebreaker works. Each state gets 1 vote. So that 1 representative in Wyoming, who happens to be Dick Cheney's daughter, she gets to cast 1 vote and she'll vote Republican. The 27 reps in Florida, and right now there's 14 Republicans, 13 Dems, which means they'll cast 1 vote Republican. The 50-some reps in California, so tens of millions of people in California will get 1 vote. 450,000 people in Wyoming will get 1 vote. So each state gets 1 by 1 by 1. We've got to get to 26. You need a majority. The Republicans control 26 of the delegations around the country today. So if it went to a tiebreaker, the Republicans would win Trump would win by 1 single vote. If it went to a tiebreaker. 4 quick elections and I'm done. 1800 gives us an indication of what could happen. 1800 was Jefferson against John Adams. That's not John Adams you're looking at. Jefferson beats John Adams. You're looking at Aaron Burr. Burr was supposed to be Jefferson's vice president. But in the 1800 election, Jefferson and Burr tied. The Electoral College was a dead tie, 73-73. No one had a majority, which means what? It had to go to a tiebreaker in the House, and each state got 1 vote. So the House voted, and guess what? It was a tie. No one had a majority. So they voted again and again and again. Get this. It took 4 months of voting, November, December, January, February. So in other words, they went far beyond those mandated dates I just told you about. After 35 tied ballots where no one had a majority, on the 36th ballot, Alexander Hamilton said, we have to save this country and break the tie. Why would no one break the tie? Because the politics of 1800 were just like the politics of 2020, venomous, highly partisan. If you broke the tie, that was the end of your political career, which would happen today. If you broke the tie. It could be the end of your life. People were getting death threats. Remember, there were bombs mailed to Democrats a year ago. So this is what was happening in 1800. On the 36th ballot, Hamilton said, we've got to orchestrate a tiebreaker. Here was the problem for Hamilton. He had two enemies, Jefferson and Burr. Talk about the fire or the frying pan. Hamilton shocked everybody by orchestrating the vote to go to Jefferson. So Jefferson in 1801 became our third president. Burr, as you know, was pissed, and he shot and killed Jefferson a few years after, Hamilton a few years after. So there could be these kind of scenarios. 1824, another crazy scenario. It was Andrew Jackson against John Quincy Adams. That's who you're looking at. After the election, Jackson was leading in the popular vote. Jackson was leading in the Electoral College vote, but he did not have a majority. It was a four-way race. Jackson was in first place, John Quincy in second, and two other candidates. What happened was Henry Clay of Kentucky orchestrated what was known as the corrupt bargain, and he denied Jackson and picked John Quincy Adams. John Quincy Adams then picked Clay as the Secretary of State. They flipped the Electoral College and gave it to John Quincy Adams. Was that unethical? Darn right. Was it illegal or unconstitutional? No. So there's a scenario. Two more, 1876. I'll end with this because I'm overdue. This is the guy that looks like the bass player for ZZ Top or Duck Dynasty Extra. That's Rutherford B. Hayes. The other fellow that looks very young, like Mayor Pete, is Samuel Tilden. Hayes of Ohio, Tilden of New York. 76 was bizarre. What happened was Tilden was ahead in the popular vote and the Electoral College, but he was one vote shy of getting a majority in the Electoral College. There were three states that had yet to certify their electors: South Carolina, Louisiana, and, you guessed it, Florida, of course. So what happened is those electors were in contention. Here is the big issue in 1876, Reconstruction. Lincoln designed it and then was assassinated. The North reconstructed, rebuilt the South. Southerners called it an occupation and didn't want the North there. So those three Southern states, including us, said, whichever candidate gets rid of Reconstruction has our vote. So the House, instead of doing a tiebreaker, as mandated by the Constitution, the House passed a law that said we're going to create a special House commission of 15 members to pick the president. They put 8 Republicans and 7 Democrats on it. By an 8-7 partisan vote, they picked the Republican Hayes, who supported the 3 Southern states. He was inaugurated March 4th, 1877. The next day, he ended Reconstruction. So there's just crazy things out there. Everybody, thank you. Keep an eye on Nate Silver in 2008 and 2012. His data analytics, his mathematical algorithm proved to be the closest of any of the major analysts. So keep an eye. His website's 538. Nate Silver, check his website before you buy your lottery ticket, in other words. This is the man, Alan Lichtman. He's a professor at American University. All the major analysts got 2016 wrong, except one, this guy, Alan Lichtman. Lichtman said Hillary will win the popular vote, Trump will win by 2 or 3 states. That's what happened. So keep an eye on Lichtman. Lichtman's calling Biden in a relatively close race. I always look at Halloween mask sales. Just joking. 8 out of 8. In 8 straight elections, the candidate that sold the most masks won. So Trump sold more masks than Hillary, and Trump sells more masks than everybody. So Trump will sell more masks than Biden, of course, so he could probably win. And then one last thing, Vigo County, Indiana. From my years of media commentary, I always found out with Vigo County, get this, they're 16 for 16. And they got it right in 2016. Let me take it a step further. If Vigo County votes Democrat by 2%, that's what's going to happen nationally. If they vote Republican by 1%, that's going to count. That's what's going to happen nationally. Why? I have no idea. For obvious reasons, I have avoided going to Vigo County, Indiana. But those are some things to take a look at. I'm happy to take questions.
Well, thank you very, very much. You're like a walking encyclopedia. You don't even have notes or minute, anything in front of you. It's just coming out of your head. It's unbelievable. I know we're over time, but if those of you that don't have anywhere you need to be, and if you can give us another 10 minutes, Mr. Watson, I would like to ask if anybody has any questions. I do know that there's a question. Okay, there's 2. First one so far. regardless of whether Garland was appointed during the Obama administration, is it legal for Trump to appoint the Senate to confirm, to appoint and the Senate to confirm Amy Coney Barrett, politics and optics aside?
Yes, it's legal. There have been 30 appointments to the high bench in the president's last year. Ronald Reagan's final year as president, he made 30 appointments to the bench. Reagan made 33 appointments, not to the bench, like cabinet, envoys, UN ambassador. So yes, it's legal in the last year. There's nothing that says it. By custom, given the Lincoln custom, the George Washington custom, once you get into September, October, it's not considered appropriate to appoint someone to the high bench that late in the game. However, it is legal, yes.
All right. The next question, filibuster, yes or no?
I've always opposed the filibuster. Filibusters, the House doesn't have a filibuster, only the Senate. We should not allow one person to control the national agenda. For example, the Senate uses all kinds of rules. Whether you like him or don't like him, one thing that I'm upset about, Mitch McConnell calls himself the Grim Reaper. That's not me calling him that. There are well over 100 bills for COVID relief, for insurance, for healthcare, for PPE that he just hasn't taken up. Now, if one chamber passes, I think the other chamber has a responsibility to vote on it. They can vote it down. And this is bills I like and bills I don't like, whether it's Democrat or Republican, I promise. Yes, I'm a registered Democrat, but one thing I am far more than a Democrat is I'm an American and I'm a history wonk, and I love my Constitution more than any party or politician. So you can't have one person holding up hundreds of bills. Likewise, Strom Thurmond, for example, has the record for the longest filibuster back in 1957. He filibustered for 24 hours to kill a civil rights bill. I'm sorry, but one person should not hold off an entire national agenda. I mean, this could be 90% public approval, bipartisan, bicameral support, and one person could kill it. So yeah, the filibuster is antiquated, indefensible, non-democratic, not party, small letter D, democracy.
Absolutely. All right. So there's a few people, if you have questions, if you wouldn't mind typing them in the chat box. Next question, what are the pros and cons of DC and Puerto Rico becoming actual states?
Yeah, so I've always believed DC should be a state. And I have been predicting and betting friends of mine who are historians that not that DC will be a state within the next 4 years, but if Biden wins, I think there will be a serious consideration and a serious movement to make DC a state. So first off, the population of Washington, DC is the same as Wyoming, Alaska, North Dakota. So it's similar as other states. Why should Americans not be able to vote in certain circumstances? It makes no sense whatsoever. Now, for DC to become a state, there's a process for admitting new states. It requires a vote from Congress and a nod from the president. There's one additional wrinkle for DC. So Sarah, here's the wrinkle. The 1790 Residence Act. There was a big debate over where the capital city, the seat of government, as they called it, should be placed. They picked the Potomac River and they named the city after George Washington, rightfully so. By the way, that's the subject of my recent book called George Washington's Final Battle. It'll be released in January or February. At any rate, so they started to release it last spring. We got some great reviews, nominated for awards. Then COVID, so they pulled it, put it on ice. They're re-releasing it January, February. At any rate, I digress. That was a shameless plug. So here's the Residence Act. It declared that the seat of government has exclusive jurisdiction. Congress has jurisdiction over Washington. Yeah, DC has a mayor and a city council, but Congress does their budget. So what you'd have to do is you'd have to amend that exclusive jurisdiction, that component. So what they would need to do is readjust the borders of Washington, D.C. It says that it cannot be more than 10 miles square, okay? So what they'd have to do is they'd have to take and make Washington, D.C. just the National Mall. You know, the Smithsonian's, the Library of Congress, all the way down to Lincoln Memorial. Just that National Mall would be Washington. Then the federal district. Then all the people that live in Washington, it would become the state of either Washington or what they're talking about is either the state of Columbia, because we already have a Washington, or the state of Douglas, named for Frederick Douglass, who used to live there. So I think I can't for the life of me make an argument that DC shouldn't become a state. We're disenfranchising Americans. Now, the question would be then, DC would get 2 senators. So we would increase the Senate to 102. Do we keep the House at 435? That means one state has to give up a representative. And that's going to be a bloodbath because no one's going to want to give up a representative. Either that or they'd have to amend. In 1929, there was a Federal Reapportionment Act, which stated that up until 1929, as the population grew, each state got more and more and more representatives. In 1929, they fixed the House at 435. Now each representative just has a bigger population, roughly 800,000. So they'd have to either amend that or one state would have to lose a representative. It would probably be one of the Rust Belt states, Connecticut, Pennsylvania, New Jersey, New York. That would be a dogfight. So those are the questions. Puerto Rico, I think you could make an argument for statehood, an argument against statehood. It's part of our colonial heritage, right? Dating from 1898 and the Spanish-American War. So you can make an argument, yay or nay.
So much to think about, simple question and all of the ramifications. All right. What is your opinion of stacking the courts? I'm putting in quotes.
I'm against it. So we have 9 justices on the court. I've always opposed stacking, which would be moving it to 11, 12, 13. FDR tried that and it blew back in his face and he wisely gave it up. So I hope if the Democrats win, they don't try to stack the court. What I have always favored, Sarah, is a 10-year term limit for the high court. I don't think you should be able to be 90 years old in your 43rd year on the high court in a democracy. That makes no sense to me. 10 years is long enough to put your stamp on the high court, and that goes for amazing justices like RBG or a Marshall or the ones from history, or for not so amazing justices like Clarence Thomas, who literally has nothing ever to say, never writes opinions. So I think 10 years. Now, could the Democrats stack the court without the Constitution? Yes. It does not say how many justices there have to be in the Constitution. Article 3 does not say 9 justices, does not. So it doesn't require a constitutional amendment. In one of the very first bills passed by the first Congress was the Judiciary Act. And that said there should be 6 justices on the high court. So throughout our history, the number of justices have moved up and down. So it's changed by law. So you would not need a constitutional amendment. All the Democrats would need would be a majority in Congress and a president willing to not veto it, and they could change the number. Has it been done in the past? Yes. Is it constitutional? Yes. Do I hope they do it? Absolutely not. Leave it alone. So.
All right. And then the last question I see here, could the National Popular Vote Compact succeed legally?
Yeah, it could. So all we need to do is we need one of 2 options. Either A, you need to amend the Constitution to get rid of the Electoral College and create a popular vote, or B, each state could amend their state constitutions to create a popular vote. That's what Nebraska and Maine did a few decades ago. They changed their state constitution to create a district vote, instead, or they could change it to a popular. Florida could amend our Constitution. God knows we've amended the Constitution. We have one of the largest, most unwieldy, indefensible constitutions in the country. Scholars always use Florida's Constitution as the national joke. I'm an animal rights guy, but we have an amendment about how do you treat pregnant pigs. I think we should treat them right, but it should not be in the Constitution. We have 6 amendments now, although I think some of them make a lot of sense. I'll probably vote against all 6. Even if I agree with them, here's why. They should be done by the legislature, not by constitutional amendment. If I want to raise the minimum wage, that should be the Congress or the state legislature, not the Constitution. So Florida and our legislature is one of the worst in the country for this. And again, it's sort of the butt of jokes in academia. they amend the Constitution when they want something done, but they don't want to take the political heat for doing it through the legislature. So shame on them. Now the chamber has weighed in on a lot of these, and the chamber is supporting some and not supporting others. I think the chamber is a wise organization. I always look at how the chamber weighs in, but I find myself this year for the first time disagreeing with the chamber because I think some of the things they're supporting should not be in our Constitution. It should be done legislatively.
When you say the chamber, you're saying the Florida State Chamber, correct?
Florida Chamber, yeah, the Florida Chamber has weighed in. I just while I was waiting, I emailed Barbara and Chastity a voting guide that I put together. It has all 6 amendments, and I rewrite them in plain English. And I also tell you the organizations that support them and oppose them and who introduced them. So the Florida Chamber has weighed in. And the Florida Chamber, I think, is usually an organization worth looking at. But, you know, I put my reputation on it that some of these issues, even if I support them, they just don't belong in the Constitution. So you can you're free, Sarah and everybody with the IBA, you're free to share that document I sent, or look up the League of Women Voters, the Chamber. There's a lot of organizations that put out voting guides that are very instructive and very helpful. So yeah, there is a movement for a nationwide popular vote. I think it's a no-brainer. We elect no other office the way we elect the president. No other country has such a thing. The framers didn't like it. It's always dangerous to say, what would the framers think today? Because it's such a different world. But having spent 30 years as a professor reading, writing about, and teaching the framers, I'm willing to step out and say the framers would be appalled and shocked that we still have the Electoral College. They saw it as a Band-Aid, a temporary fix until we develop a mature democracy and a voting ethic. So I think they'd be shocked and appalled. We still have it because a couple small states think it gives them more power. We still have it because the Dems and Republicans know that they're both so bad that if we had a proportional system, third parties would start to take votes. In the Electoral College, a third party could have 35% of Florida's vote. And if you have 35%, Sarah, you get goose egg electoral votes. So it denies, suppresses third parties. But the time is now for a popular vote, no question.
Well, as a strong supporter of our Constitution, of the Constitution and protector, I don't know about everyone else, but I think that Robert Watson should be Supreme Court. You got my vote, man.
I would have only one vote. That would be you. My wife would probably vote against me.
We generally, as the Boca Chamber, we generally do not support any amendment that, you know, we agree with you when it comes to none of those things should be put in our Constitution. It should be done legislatively. So, you know, I think we're very much aligned with that. You know, there's a lot of people on this call that participate in our Economic Development and Government Affairs Committee, and we create legislative agenda items. I know Stuart's a part of it, Marisol. You know, those of you that are on this call that have not been a part of those meetings, you would love it. If you love this call, you would love getting your hands dirty and being a part of those meetings, because that's where we really get in and analyze issues, and we give we basically write the Bible that we use throughout the year to advocate for business at the local, you know, the city, county, state level. So, you know, I know Karen's a part of it, and like I said, Stuart, Sharon. So, you know, be a part of that. The meeting is on Thursday at 11:30. It's a Zoom meeting where we're going to actually finalize the agenda. So if you're interested, please. And we will share Dr. Watson's, what is it? It's the amendment, the voter guide.
It's a voting guide. I can't, it's called Your Ballot in Plain English.
Which we need.
Voting for dummies, kind of, like me.
Well, and from what we were talking about prior, he takes the amendments and not just, you know, you basically rewrite them in normal person terms, not legalese. You write who brought them forward, you know, who's supporting, who's not. So it's very neutral for everyone to make their own decisions, but you give us all the information we need to make that decision. So I'm excited to see that, because it has been difficult to find a resource to go to for that. So
Thank you. And again, I want to thank Ms. Gonzalez for organizing this organization. And I want to thank you, Sarah, for hosting, and everybody for the invitations. And it was good to see so many friendly and familiar faces, everybody. Hello. I look forward to having a cold drink with everybody when this thing is behind us and actually doing something other than working and speaking to a computer screen with my days. Thank you, everybody. I appreciate it.
Thank you. And that's a great way to end this meeting. So thank you very much, and make sure you vote. Thumbs up. Bye-bye.